Yevamos Daf is the Gemara's continued search for the source of the halacha that asay doche los asay. That means when you have a situation in which you have conflicting requirements, you have an obligation to do something, but that same action would also violate something which we are forbidden to do. So you have a mitzvah asay, which is also going to violate a mitzvah los asay. Which is the correct one? What are we supposed to do? Should we do the asay and ignore the los asay, or should we withhold from doing the asay in order not to violate the los asay? So we've said that the rule is that you should do the asay. Asay pushes off, beats, defeats, overrides the los asay, that which is forbidden to do. So we should do the mitzvah. We're looking for a source for that. We've found so far two sources, but the second one that we've found was only in the opinion of Tana Debei Rabbi Yishmael. There's the Rabbanan who argue on that, and the first source wasn't so solid, so we're still continuing to look for a source for this concept. Now, along the way here, we're going to start to get into different levels of the strength of an asay, and different levels of the strength of a los asay. You'll have stronger ones and weaker ones, and if you prove to me that an asay beats a weak asay, that an asay beats a weak los asay, you haven't proven to me that it beats a stronger los asay. And if you've proven to me that a strong asay beats a los asay, you haven't proven to me that a weak asay beats a los asay. We're going to have to take into account the various levels of strength that we have here. So the Gemara will look for sources that give us all the levels of strength that we have. Ultimately, our goal is to get to the mitzvah of yibum against achosisha. When a person is faced with a mitzvah to do yibum, with a woman who falls to yibum to him, but he is his wife's sister, so it's a violation of the issur of marrying a wife's sister. That's the level of strength we're ultimately trying to get to, not because that is permitted, it's actually forbidden, but because we needed a special source to show that that is forbidden, and therefore that means that had I not had that source, I would have assumed that it is permitted, and where would I get that from? So let's go through where we're up to. The Gemara says, what is my source? Again, that an asay pushes off a los asay. Here we're just talking about a regular asay and a regular los asay. So the Gemara says, I'll tell you where you get it from. You get it from the case of the haircut of a mitzorah. A mitzorah is supposed to, as part of his purification process, after he recovers from his taras, he's supposed to shave his head. The problem is, therefore, he's cutting off his peos. That is an issur d'oraisa, to cut off the corners of the hair of the head. So how are you allowed to do that? Now, first of all, how do you know that you're supposed to do that? So the Gemara says it comes from the fact that when it discusses the haircut of the mitzorah, it says, on the seventh day of his purification, he should shave off all his hair, as rosho, as zikano, as gabos einov, as kol sa'aro yigalech. He should shave off all the hair on his head. Then it should, the exact translation is as follows: he should shave off all his hair, his head, and his beard. Now, why do you have to tell me to shave his head if you just told me to shave all his hair? You're obviously emphasizing that even someone who you think, even the parts of the head that you would think should not be shaven, like the corners of the hair, the corners of the head, the peos, those should be shaven. So the mitzvah's asay of shaving the hair of a mitzvah pushes off the mitzvah's los asay of not cutting off the peos. And therefore, this is a source that we can learn from here to all places that an asay defeats a los asay. The Gemara points out this only works according to the opinion that shaving the entire head violates the issur of cutting off peos, which is how we hold. There is an opinion that holds that that's not a problem. It's only if you cut off the corners of the head, the peos, and you leave hair on the rest of the head, that there's a problem. Well, we're not going with that opinion here, and therefore we have a good source. So the problem with this source is that this is a los asay, the los asay of not cutting off the peos is a weak los asay. So if you've only showed me that an asay defeats a weak los asay. What's weak about this? It doesn't apply to women. Women are allowed to shave as much of the hair as they want. They do not have the halacha that they're not allowed to cut off the corner of the head. Therefore, this is not a good source. It doesn't teach me a regular asay against a los asay. It only teaches me an asay against a weak los asay. So the Gemara says, okay, I'll give you another source, and that's the case of shaving the beard. Shaving the beard, it says specifically that a Kohen should not shave his beard. It says everybody shouldn't shave their beard, but the Gemara here goes to the Kohen. The Kohen should not shave his beard. Now, what if the Kohen's a mitzorah? He has to shave his beard. How do you know? Because going back to the pasuk, it says you should shave his hair, his head, and his beard. Why do you have to point out the beard? I already know you said to shave all the hair. That's to tell me that even the Kohen, who it says specifically this is special lav, not to shave his beard, if he's a mitzorah, he should shave his beard. Again, asay beats los asay. Now, the obvious question is, this is also not an asay. This is also not a los asay that applies to everyone. It only applies to people with a beard. It only applies to Kohanim. It only applies to men. So Gemara says, no, that's true, but you have two sources now for the same level of asay and los asay. You have two cases of an asay defeating a los asay that does not apply to everyone. Why do you need two cases of the same thing? One is therefore coming to move to a level higher. The original source, that of shaving the head and even cutting off the payos, that teaches me that an asay pushes off a los asay, which does not apply to everyone. Then you have another thing of the same source. We have a rule: if you teach me the same thing twice, I can expand one to one level higher, and therefore I could say that the second time you teach me the same thing, I'm meant to learn from there that even in a case where it does not apply to where it applies to everyone, and that is that you have a los asay that applies to everyone, your asay can still defeat that. So Gemara says there's a problem with this, and the problem is that here the los asay of the Kohanim not shaving their beard is particularly strong, and that's because Kohanim have a lot of mitzvos. Kohanim have more mitzvos than a regular Yisrael. They have a lot of extra mitzvos. Therefore, their mitzvos are considered stronger because they're more obligated, and it makes more sense that their los asay should not be defeated by the asay. Therefore, these two things are not equally repetitive. One, the original source is teaching me about a los asay against an asay that is against a los asay that doesn't apply to everyone. The second source is teaching me about an asay against a los asay that doesn't apply to everyone, but has a special strength that is talking about Kohanim. That is also defeated. So I need that to tell me that. So both the sources that are only going to be able to teach me that an asay can defeat a los asay that doesn't apply to everyone. You have two sub-levels within that. One which doesn't apply to everyone, but applies to Yisrael. One which doesn't apply to everyone, but we're speaking about Kohanim that are stronger in their los asays. Therefore I need both of those. So I have nothing to teach me about an asay against a regular los asay that applies to everyone. So Gemara says, okay, I'll give you a third source, and that is the haircut of a mitzorah who's a nazir. A nazir is not allowed to cut his hair. The Torah says, Kol yemei neder nizo tar lo yavar al rosho. You're not allowed to cut his hair. Yet, if he's a mitzorah, he is supposed to cut his hair. That teaches me that you do defeat the haircut of a mitzorah. The mitzvah to say of a mitzorah defeats the isser to cut the hair of a nazir, and therefore we have our source. Now again, this doesn't apply to everyone, but this is a second source now. It's really a third, but because Kohanim were stronger, so it's a second source that a mitzvah's asay defeats a regular mitzvah's los asay that does not apply to everyone. I don't need both. One is to teach me that even if you have a asay against a los asay that does apply to everyone, that is defeated as well. Someone says that the problem here is otherwise. The problem here is that this los asay of shaving the hair of a nazir is particularly weak, and that's because this is a los asay that you can get rid of. A nazir can end his nazirus as he wishes. He can go to a chacham and he can say, if I would have known I was going to be a mitzvah, I never would have made my nazirus vow, and take off that thing and get rid of the los asay altogether. So it's an endable asay. It's an endable los asay. That's weak. So therefore, the fact that you have an extra pasuk teaching me that is defeated, I can't use that to teach me that a asay beats a los asay that applies everywhere. I can only use it for a weak los asay that applies everywhere, and that is a los asay which, although it applies everywhere, is weak because it is endable. You can bring an end to that los asay if you wish. I still don't have a source that an asay beats a regular los asay which is not endable. The Gemara now supports this position by saying, I want to prove to you that you can't learn anything from a nazir because he's an endable los asay, and that is because if you look carefully, shaving or giving a haircut to a nazir is not just a los asay; it's a los asay and an asay together. It says tar lo yaver al rosho, los asay, do not pass a razor over his head, and then it says gadel perasar rosho, he should grow out his hair. That's a mitzvah asay, saying that you should make sure that his hair grows. That's an asay and a los asay together that says that he can't not take a haircut. Now, generally the rule is that if you have an asay that's going up against a los asay and an asay teamed up, the original asay loses, and you do not do the mitzvah asay. So you should not give a haircut to a mitzvah who's a nazir. In this case, you do though, and the reason is because it's a weak los asay. Even though it's a los asay and asay team, because it's endable, it's particularly weak. So the Gemara says, therefore, we're going to abandon this entire line of reasoning. We're going to go back to our original pasuk, which is from Tzitzis, where we had seen no silbas shatnes. Don't put on shatnes. Wear tzitzis. We put the mitzvah of wearing tzitzis right next to the iser, the losa say, to wear shatnes. We put the two of them together to teach you that you are allowed to wear tzitzis even if they're shatnes. You have the mitzvah of wearing tzitzis, even if it's violating the losa say of shatnes, that is an illegal combination of wool and linen in the same garment. Now the problem was that we said you cannot learn that unless it is extra. There's something that's extra about the phrase, and we had run out of things to be extra. The Gemara says, now we're going to go back to that. I'm going to show you that there is something extra there, and it's not quite extra, but it is odd, and that's to teach me that I'm supposed to learn something based on the juxtaposition of these two phrases. And what's odd is that it uses the term gedilim. Gedilim means twined string. It should have said tzitzis. Tzitzis is always called tzitzis. Why is it called gedilim here all of a sudden? That's to show me that I'm supposed to learn something. What I'm supposed to learn is the combination, the juxtaposition of the mitzvah of tzitzis to the isra of shatnes to show that tzitzis overrides shatnes. Gemara says that's not accurate. That's not correct, because there's a reason that I need gedilim here. Gedilim teaches me how many strings you're supposed to have. It's supposed to have 8 strings, and I learned it as follows. The word gedilim means twined thread. Twined is a minimum of 2 threads. It says gedilim plural, which means I need 2 times 2, so that's 4, and it has to be put into the tzitzis corner and folded. That I see that it says that you should be gidil u'pasleu mitaycha. You're supposed to put them in and have it hang like a tassel, so it should be twined and a tassel. A part of the strings are tied. That's the upper third is tied in knots and woven, and the rest of it is hanging loose. These are all halachas we need, and we need the word gedilim to teach me these, so they're not extra. Someone says, okay, you're right, but there's a different word that's extra. It says, lo silba shatnes, temro pishtim yachdav. Do not put on shatnes, wool and linen together. Why do I need the word together? Obviously, you're saying don't put on shatnes, wool and linen. What's together for? So that's extra, and that's, tell me I'm supposed to learn the juxtaposition. Where it says, no, that's no good either, because you need the word yachdav to teach me that it has to be sewn together with 2 stitches to violate the Isser Deraisa. If you just take wool and linen together and sew it together with 1 stitch or less, that's not the Isser of shatnes. It's got to be 2 stitches. So the Gemara says, okay, so it's from the word shatnes. The word shatnes here is a funny word. What's it doing here? The Gemara says, no, that's not an extra word. That's to teach me that you only violate the Isser of shatnes if the cloth is made of processed wool and linen. That is where it is combed, the threads, the fibers of the flax and the wool were processed properly in 3 steps. They were combed out, spun into thread, and then woven into cloth. If it's made, let's say, like felt, or without this full processing, it's not a violation of the Isser of shatnes. So Gemara says, that's why I need the word shatnes. Gemara says, no. That you learn from the fact that we use the word shatnes instead of the word kilayim. Kilayim is a general term for a combination of 2 illegal things. This is kilayim. The fact that we use the word shatnes instead of that is to teach me those 2 halachos, those 3 halachos. Those 3 steps need to be done, and that's because shatnes is a combination of the terms shua, tavi, and nuz. Shatnes, shua, tavi, nuz, which means combed out, spun, and woven. However, you didn't need the word kilayim altogether. You could have just said, don't wear wool and linen together. Using any word is extra, and that's to teach me that the juxtaposition of the 2 psukim is coming to tell you halacha. You're allowed to wear tzitzis, and you should wear tzitzis even if it's shatnes. Okay, the Gemara accepts this as a finalized source, but this only teaches me a general, normal, neutral asay against a normal, neutral los asay. We're now trying to get to what we originally started with, which was the mitzvah of Yibum against the Isser of Achos Isha. And Achos Isha is a very strong los asay. It's a los asay which has kares. Somebody who marries his wife's sister is liable to the kares penalty. That's a very powerful thing. And therefore, where do we see that an asay pushes away a strong los asay which carries kares? That I would need to have a special source to tell me that in this case it does not, which is what the Gemara had brought that started this whole thing. So Gemara says, okay, I'm going to bring a source where a los asay, where an asay, that is, pushes away a los asay which contains a kares. And the Gemara tries 3 attempts. The Gemara has the mitzvah of Pesach, Korban Pesach, which can be done even on Shabbos. Shabbos carries a kares. And the mitzvah of Mila, which can be done on Shabbos. And you have the Korban Tamid, which can be done on Shabbos. These are 3 mitzvahs I say which you do on Shabbos, and they violate Shabbos. Now, I need all 3 of these because the Gemara says none of them work. And the Gemara tried each of them one at a time. And the reason that none of them work is that they each have a special strength. The Korban Pesach carries kares itself. That's why it's especially strong. The carbon Mila had 13 brisim. The term bris, covenant, is used 13 times in discussing the Mila. It's a special strength to that mitzvah to say. And the carbon Tamid is something that takes place every day. So that has a special strength because it's a constant mitzvah. So all these are especially strong. You cannot learn from any of these that Yibum could push away Achos Isha. Yibum doesn't have any of these special strengths that these three essays do. So Gemara says I'm going to learn from a combination of the two, and that is when I take two mitzvahs and I put them together, any individual strength that each one has is nullified, because that cannot be the reason that it pushes away the Los Essay, which has a kares, because we see the other one doesn't have the special strength. So the Gemara says, by bringing them together, I show that each individual strength is not what it causes this assay to push off the Los Assay that has a kares, and therefore I can learn from the combination of two or three of them that you can push off the Los Assay of kares with a regular assay. So Gemara says it's not true, because any combination of two, or even all three, has a joint strength over Yibum. And therefore I could say that that joint strength is what pushes away the Los Assay of kares, but Yibum does not have that joint strength. Now, what's the joint strength? So the Gemara says, Pesach and Tamid are both karbanos. Karbanos have a special strength. Pesach and Mila both carry kares. They're both very strong. Somebody who doesn't bring a carbon Pesach or doesn't have a bris Mila is liable to kares. That does not apply to Yibum. So therefore that pushes off the Los Assay of kares, but Yibum shouldn't. And if you want to talk about Tamid and Mila, both of those were mitzvahs that were given before Matan Torah, before the rest of the Torah was given. So that's a special strength to them also. If you want to bring from all three, so the Gemara says, there is an opinion that the Karban Tamid was brought before Matan Torah, was brought in the Midbar, and therefore all three of these exist before Matan Torah. Mila, given to Avram Avinu, Pesach, given to Mitzrayim, and Karban Tamid, according to the opinion that was brought earlier. So therefore, all three of them have a strength in their assay that the Yibum doesn't, and therefore you cannot learn from them that Yibum defeats Achos Isha, if not for the pasuk of Aleha, the special source that Yibum does not defeat Achos Isha. So again, why do I need a special source for that? I should know on my own without any special source that Yibum cannot defeat Achos Isha. So the Gemara says I have another source, which is also a place where the assay does not beat the Los Assay, but I need a special pasuk to tell me that the assay doesn't beat the Los Assay, which means if not for the pasuk, I would have assumed it does beat the Los Assay, and that's my source, that an assay beats the Los Assay even if the Los Assay has kares. And this is from the halacha that I need the Torah to tell me that one should not honor his mother and father at the expense of Shabbos. And if somebody's mother and father tell them to do something for them, that's a mitzvah to say to do that, but you don't do it if they tell you to violate Shabbos, and there's no reason. So the Gemara says Shabbos is kares, father and mother is a Los Assay. I know on my own that you don't need to, that you shouldn't be able to do that, but the Torah comes and tells me that a special pasuk to tell me that you should not listen to your mother and father and violate Shabbos, and that is the pasuk of Ish Imo of Batirova Shabbos Society to Shmaru, puts the two of them together to show that just the reason you should listen to your father and your mother if he tells them to violate my word is because they're obligated to listen to me as well. They have a special source for that. The fact that I have a special source for that teaches me that if not for that special source, I would have thought you should listen to your mother and father. Now, that's a mitzvah assay that's pushing away a Los Assay that has kares. So therefore, I can see that a mitzvah assay does push away a Los Assay that has kares, and therefore I would see that the mitzvah of Yibum pushes away a Los Assay that has kares, unless I have a special source. I do have a special source in the case of not listening to your mother and father, and I need a special source in the case of Yibum, that you should not do Yibum at the expense of the Isser V'Achos Isha. Mer says no, not acceptable. And the reason is that when the Torah says to violate Shabbos, when the mother and father are saying violate Shabbos, and they're not necessarily telling you to do an Isser which has kares. Not every mitzvah of Shabbos carries kares. Only something which you do with your body. If you drive your animal and have your animal work for you, that's an Isser of Shabbos. It's only a lav without kares. And therefore maybe we're talking about where the mother and father told you to do to have the animal work, and therefore it's a lav against a regular los asay. And I would have said that it is an asay against a regular los asay without kares. That's where I need the Torah to tell me don't listen to your mother and father, because otherwise we'd follow the general rule that an asay beats a los asay. But you have no source that an asay beats a los asay with kares, and therefore we're back with a problem. The Gemara will continue the discussion on Daf Vav.